Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. Today I'm with my friend Jeff Panik. He's a financial advisor, speaker, and an author who's made it his mission to help people bring order and confidence to their financial lives. I'll tell you, just knowing Jeff in the last couple of months, I've thought a lot about my financial world. And trust me, I've booked like 4 calls with my own financial advisor. That's just how good he is about making you think about things that can set up your future. From growing up in public housing to serving in the U.S. Army and building a 25-year career in finance, Jeff has seen how discipline, clarity, and consistency can transform a person's financial future. His new book, Your Future is Now, Your Blueprint for Solving Your Retirement Puzzle, simplifies that complex world of retirement planning into actionable steps anyone can follow. It's not about chasing market highs. It's about designing a life of stability, security, and purpose. Today, we're going to unpack some of Jeff's knowledge and wisdom, his approach to money and mindset, and what it really takes to build a lasting financial foundation in a world full of noise and uncertainty. Jeff, thanks for coming on the show, my friends. Good to see you.
Great to see you too, Hussein. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to dive a little bit into your new book. Obviously, this is your second book.
Yes.
You shared a lot about, I kind of want to give people a frame about sort of who you are, where you're from, and sort of how you grew up and got you into this world to begin with. You have a very interesting story. So I want to let people sort of hear that a little bit from you. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up and serving in the Army?
Yes. So, my first thought wasn't to become a financial advisor or focus on finance. I was just trying to survive really when growing up. And my father passed away when I was an infant and didn't have any life insurance. So my mother was an administrative assistant. So we grew up in public housing, or I grew up in public housing. And she really did everything she could for me, just pushed me to make sure that I finished everything that I started, which went a long way to getting me kind of where I am today. And then I was the first one to go to college in my family, which, looking back, it's hindsight is what it is. I could have done a lot of things differently. And so I didn't really take college necessarily seriously. I took probably the fun aspect probably more so. And so, I ended up getting a letter from Sally Mae that said I owed $1,000 a month for 10 years. And this is in the mid 90s. So, to factor inflation, it's probably about 1,500 or 2,000 a month now. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I realized the Army had a program where if you go in, they would forgive your loans. So I went into the Army, completed service there, and ended up going in the financial services industry. But the Army, I like to say I learned more in my time in the Army than I probably did anywhere else, just in terms of just structure, discipline, and really just communicating and dealing with all types of people.
Yeah, that's really powerful, man. I mean, you kind of glossed over the fact that, shout out to your mom, who obviously raised an amazing human being, but through a very difficult time. I like, we've shared our stories sort of kind of back and forth. Like, I didn't grow up in America. Like, I grew up in America, but like we kind of ended up here after a refugee camp. So like, my parents, we were on public housing and welfare and all the assistance that we could get to kind of get our feet under us. And luckily my brother started working, and my mom and dad, and it kind of got, eventually got out of that world. But I'm very grateful for those services. And I know, we've talked about that briefly sort of off camera or whatever, but then like there comes a time where you got to make decisions to help your financial self. Like you look into the future, and you, like you said, like I opened up this Sally Mae thing, as have I. I'm like, oh my God, I owe these people so much money. What do I do?
I thought it was a magazine subscription service. That's how clueless I was. I was thinking, I was getting some free magazines, or I was going to, be able to do something like that. And instead I got a bill. So
you got a big bill, right?
Big bill,
And
with no resources to pay. So,
right. And that, I think if you're still a boy, that will turn you into a man real quick. You know what I mean? In our professional world.
It does. It makes you really think, what puts things in perspective. And, I just had no idea. And, it's having no idea is not an excuse. And, really with both books, I just, really, I view really society now where there's people that have certain advantages. One of the advantages that some individuals have is just family members that will teach them lessons that they can learn from about
Yes.
money. And I think that is the biggest thing that is lacking in the education system, where you have some people, I compare it to like, your financial life is kind of like a marathon. And
Mm,
some people start out at mile marker 6 or 7 because they have help. Other
yes.
people are just standing at the starting line when the gun goes off, and you're just standing there figuring out what to even do. And
Yes.
that's what I've tried to do with the books, and I try to do is try to help educate, because I think, really financial literacy, if you start the wrong direction, it's just extremely difficult to course correct.
It's so difficult to course correct. And let me tell you something, man. Again, I grew up, and as did you, right? Like when you kind of find out the information or start reading a book or two, or someone hints at a piece of knowledge that you're like, huh, I didn't know that. Like I remember like the first piece of wisdom that I got was from when I first got my credit card. I was young, and I went in to activate it or something like that at the Bank of America, and the lady was so nice. She's like, "Listen, Hussein, it's $1,500. It's not going to change your life, but here's what will. If you use all this money and not pay it back the day of, right?" And I'm
Mhm.
like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Go use this just for gasoline, and then like as soon as you go do that, like the day after, pay off the $25 so
Mhm.
that you build a habit and that you're never going to be late
Mhm.
beyond that thing." Right. And I was just like, that was like the first, I feel like, legit piece of information that I got about how to use a credit card. Right.
Mhm.
And then she was just like, if you don't know how to use this thing, just, it's dangerous if you don't know how to use it. It could work really well for you if you understand how to use it. So she's like, go out there, get a book or two, and read about how you can improve your financials. And then, I was young and I was starting businesses, and I was doing t-shirts and stuff. And that little piece of information helped me so much. Right. And then I started sort of accumulating more knowledge because, dude, my dad didn't know anything about credit cards and 401k. We came from a completely different world,
Mhm.
literally, right? And so, I'm very grateful for people like you, and what I loved working with you on, all this stuff that we've gotten to work on with your book is because you're right. I think financial literacy is probably the only thing we don't really know or understand even beyond. I was in college and I never took a financial literacy class, which is, looking back, you're like, what was I doing? What was
What's
I possibly doing? Like, yeah.
It's just crazy. Only about 22 of the 50 states have financial literacy courses mandatory for graduation. A lot of them have waivers, and really, when you graduate, it becomes really an issue where you have to make a lot of decisions very quickly, and you don't have a whole lot of resources often to do that. And
Yeah.
oftentimes you jump at the first thing. And I use the example even of the credit cards you mentioned. It's just
Yeah.
amazing if you turn on a sporting event, the number of credit card companies that are advertising, or if you go to a college bookstore, it's just amazing. They're all out front trying to sell credit cards, and it's kind of not it should be a different direction of things, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and maybe you can help clarify it for me and the people in the audience. Like, we have our own bias as to like why this kind of money is thrown at us, right? Like, it's obviously going to create debt in our lives. It's going to create this sort of pressure point where we have to constantly pay this debt, and there's of course interest on top of that debt that people, companies, organizations benefit from, right? And I want to get into the meat of your work, of course, and how you help people really structure and understand financials. But just for us who are like sort of in a way frustrated with that system, how are we, two things, not educated about how to understand our financials, and then bombarded with opportunities to create debt? Like, why is that? I think there's a mistrust, right, with the financial world
Yes.
and financial advisors and all this stuff, because you're like, well, you're kind of attached to this credit card company. You like in their mind, at least
Yes.
when I was young, that's how I thought about it. You're kind of part of the problem. How are you going to solve my problem if you're going to create more problems for me, right? But that's not necessarily true. So why is it? Why is it that this financial world that seems like wants to help you, the world you're in, and then there's a financial world that I feel like is out to like destroy you in a way? It's got an evil side to it. It's a very
Yes.
double-edged sword. So can you help us just kind of decipher between these two worlds a little bit more?
Yeah, I think, the challenge really becomes just the amount of information that is out there. It used to be the information was more limited, and you would have to go, as an example, to the library, to a bookstore and buy a book about it. Now, you can go on Google and search, and you get about 350 million hits for some of the search topics or financial
Right.
topics. And
Right.
that's not always good, because what you're searching for oftentimes, you come back with sponsored ads. You come back with things that might not even work for you or be the most appropriate thing. And so
Right.
really, I look, and I'm very kind of cynical about the way everything has been laid out. And it's probably from my just background and where I'm coming from, but I really
Sure.
feel very sympathetic to people starting out, because even if you're trying to do the right thing, you can end up doing the wrong thing just because you don't have the right objective advice that you can count on. And it's really
Yeah.
subjective, based upon someone trying to sell you a credit card, or someone, if you're looking to buy all these things that you have to do. Do you buy a car? Do you lease a car? How do you figure out how to even get a loan? Where do you get that from? Where do you get the insurance? How do all these things work? And there's not a real good guide coming out to really help you with that. And you hope you have friends and family that can help you, but oftentimes, the friends and family are in a similar situation to you. So
Right. They're just as clueless. Yeah.
and I mean, I think the one thing I look back on in my life, I would have definitely taken every opportunity to find mentors or people that I thought that could help me. And I didn't really ever really think about that when I was growing up. But if you
Sure.
can find people that you can use as a resource, it makes everything. It can make things a lot easier. But it's definitely a challenge, and it's something that's not getting any easier. Even with the, I've said technology, it's the biggest blessing and the biggest curse all in one. And that's really
Yeah.
how I view it. And I think for a lot of people, it becomes almost overwhelming. And that's
Yes.
really when you start procrastinating. And as you get into debt and you get into some of these areas, the longer you procrastinate, the harder it is to course correct and adjust and change.
100%. I have two questions because this is very like interesting for me. When I was growing up, I felt like now I can point to it and know exactly what it is. It was shame. I was ashamed that I didn't know like how to structure my financials, how to structure my bank account, how to, you know, how to hold on to my money, right? It's like, the saying that I started to learn was just like, it's not what you earn, it's what you keep, right? And that like was like so,
Mhm.
again, one of those sort of revelations, right? And I'm like, oh man, that makes so much more sense, right? Um, where d- where was it in your life that you either came across a mentor or someone that was like, hey, look over here? Or was it a book? Or was it a cassette? Or was it a video? Like what made you, pivot and shift into the financial world? Or maybe perhaps who? And I guess what inspired that for you?
I think the biggest change for me was when I got the letter from Sally Mae, and then
Mm,
really trying to back it out from there and try to understand things. And the thing that I think it's important to understand is, and I look at my books, I think you can almost use them as a reference, because in a lot of cases, you're never going to be doing everything all at one time. And if you try to do everything at one time, you're going to end up doing nothing, because it's
sure.
just overload. So, really with most people, I suggest you doing it anything in pieces, where you do it in piece, where it's in pieces that are thought out. And really for me, when I was in the military, you get to be around all kinds of different people that were, that have GEDs, and people that went to West Point. And so
Sure.
they're at Harvard, you name it. And you learn a little bit from all of them. And I think that's kind of one of the benefits that I think I had, was some time to kind of think through everything. and I didn't have to worry about, how I was going to pay the loans because the Army was taking care of that. So I could focus on kind of just learning around the edges of things. And I think really, I didn't quite understand a lot of the pieces of finance until I really and I went through a training program for about 3 years where they trained from, start to finish of financial services, and I've since became a CFP and I have other designations. But really, I think for anyone, and I still learn, I think it's one of the few professions, I think most professions though, but this is one in particular where it's constant lifelong learning. Things are always changing, things are getting more complicated, and it's a matter of kind of staying after it.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I think for me was like, stop being afraid of it. Like it came to a point where, like, whether it was student debt or, like, just because my family doesn't know how to do this stuff, not only do I need to understand my credit cards, but I need to understand, like, business loans and financials and how I could potentially sell my business one day. And I went down that rabbit hole of, like, business development, personal development, which I think then I learned, oh, I'm too concerned with, like, the bank account stuff. But what all this stuff is, and what you talk about a lot, which I love, is it's a mindset. It's like behavioral, it's psychology, right? It's all these things that are that surround the financial, the emotional, the trauma, and kind of unlearning just as much as we are learning. I think that's really powerful. So what's like, I know your new book is a lot about, and I want to unpack this a little bit more. When we think into the future, when I turned 35, I started looking like, okay, I'm going to start a family. I got a baby coming potentially soon, which I just did, right? Like, literally, this is like, so 5 years ago, right? So I was like, okay, I need to change a lot about my life, my lifestyle, all that kind of stuff. So when that baby arrives, or if that baby arrives, like, I'm thinking ahead, right? And so I started thinking about retirement, all those kinds of things. I got together with a financial advisor and just started, like you said, slowly piecing the things together. And now it's like a system that is just like, it's working. It's the wheels are moving. It's not perfect by any means, but it's something, right? And that's better than nothing.
Exactly.
And so, I know you talk a lot about, in this new book, about retirement sort of being a puzzle. Why do you describe it that way? And is that because of, that's just how people see it? Or are there that many moving parts that we need to understand? Because you obviously clarify that in your new book, but tell me a little bit about why you describe it as a puzzle.
So the reason why I view it as a puzzle really is that whether you work with someone or you do it yourself, you really are pretty much putting money away. You're not necessarily thinking about what happens afterward. And so really, as you approach or near retirement, it's, in some cases, people that are retiring now potentially could be in retirement longer than the period of time they worked. And really, what ends up happening, and I compare it really to moving, if you've lived somewhere for 25, 30, 40 years, you probably, and you're getting ready to move, you probably have a lot of stuff to either pack up or throw out. And that's really the way approaching retirement is, really putting all the different pieces of all your life's puzzle. And it's important, and I bring this up throughout the book, really not to do what your friends, family, or coworkers do. Really focus on what your situation, circumstances are, and work from there. Because what's right for one person could be completely the opposite for another. And I going through things, really, I have a thing called the financial life inventory plan. And really, the purpose of that really is to organize, because until you organize and understand what you have, it's very difficult to come up with a plan really of attack of how to handle and how to approach retirement. And some of it in the financial life inventory plan doesn't even have anything to do with really financials. Some of it is, well, what do you want to do when you retire? What do you want to volunteer? Do you want to, develop a sport? Do you want to work part-time? Do you want to do charity? Some of it's about health. Have you gotten a physical lately? Should you get one? Is there things you can do prior to retirement? And really have a plan for that as well going into retirement.
Yeah. It's really powerful because it is very broad and it is a puzzle and it's tailored to that puzzle changes for every single human, right? Spouse, you, that, kids, right? Everything plays a role and it's like a variable. And I feel like that formula. I mean, I think I sat down with my financial advisor with my wife for like 2.5 months before we started taking action on all the things because it just like he had to extract so much of who we are and like
Mhm.
the pieces to the puzzle, if you will. And of course, that sometimes changes. So you want to work with someone like yourself who's not only a professional and all these things, but also who's knowledgeable about how these things that are happening now affect our future, which I love the title of your book. Your future is now. You do create the future now. You're so right, especially when it comes to money. But I do want to come back to this like behavioral cognitive stuff. What's a mindset that people can reframe starting today about their future, about how to think about financials? What's a mindset that keeps them stuck? Maybe like for me, it was a lot of shame and like being afraid to ask. What would be something else that people kind of feel stuck in, and how can they reframe that mindset?
I think really you mentioned debt. It can be a bit overwhelming where, rather than you're just making the payments, it gets a bit overwhelming to actually go to someone and ask for help.
Yeah.
And really, if you look at the amount of money that can be wasted, if you have a fair amount of credit card debt that could be used for retirement, could be used for a whole lot of other things. That's the first really step, is to really look. And the one thing I always mention is you want to make it a habit, whether it's
Yeah.
budgeting or whether it's just looking at your statements, making sure. I use the example: if you get married, you're in a relationship, you probably don't need two of each subscription services. You don't need two
Right.
Netflix. You don't. So really,
Right.
it's a matter. I look at when you're a young adult starting out and forming a family, and then when you're approaching retirement. Those are two big transition times, and that's really a good point of both to really take inventory moving forward. And I
Mm.
think whether it's coming up to retirement where you and your spouse both have worked, and then all of a sudden you're going to be around each other constantly because you're both retiring. There's some work that needs to be done there. The same rules apply for someone starting out. They say opposites attract. In the terms of money, a lot of times two people coming from completely different monetary backgrounds really need to talk about it. And I think that's really
Mm.
communication, I think, is the marquee, not only in relationships, but especially governing around money. I think having communication, being able to communicate honestly and openly, if you can do that, you avoid a lot of the pitfalls and potholes that come about by not communicating.
Yeah, and I think there's like a sense of like honesty one needs to have with themselves. I think that's where I was, it's just like, I know I can figure this out, but like, what am I afraid of? And I think I was afraid of being judged. You know what I'm saying? About like, I was kind of like judging myself, like, how could you be in debt? You're 30, you did all right, you made a bunch of money, but like, where is the money? Like I was just kind of like constantly judging myself on like the poor decisions. But in hindsight, I was making also good decisions. I was learning a lot. I was doing I was taking a lot of risk, which I feel like in your 20s, you can do that to a certain degree, of course,
Mhm.
but but I was kind of like judging myself and then thinking that like whoever I hire to help me or whatever would also judge me. And so it was just this like cycle of like emotional rut that prevented me from learning to invest, learning to think about my future in a way that's really positive and a really healthy, and start building a healthy relationship with money. How in your world, when someone comes and works with you or decides to come work with you, typically, I mean, obviously you work with a range of people.
Mhm.
Well, let's say they're, maybe they're behind or feeling behind and they're like between their like 30s and 40s. What's like one of the first things that you start to do with them that really helps them go from feeling worried to feeling excited?
Yeah, I think one of the things really is to getting back to it as a couple, if it's a couple, really to
Hmm.
communicate with one another about what their concerns are. Because sometimes a lot of times I'll have clients and people that I meet that are worried about things that they have no reason to worry about.
Right.
And sometimes the people I think that worry the most are the ones that have the least to worry about. That's in
That's good.
some ways what I
Yeah.
found. But you can't judge a book by its cover, and you can't judge someone coming in. It's really a matter of understanding what you're trying to do. Everyone's in a different spot. And people always ask me, they say, well, what's my number, or how much income will I need, and all these things. Well, it's all over the place. What do you want to do when you retire?
Mhm.
And
Mm.
it's more of an issue of what you've accumulated to try to work through, and how do you get to the other side of that. And if it's debt, you work through a plan, you take your time. And the worst thing you can do is worry about somebody judging you, because that in itself, again, if somebody's doing that, then you need to get rid of them in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think shifting my mindset, when I was very young, I wasn't very like consumer driven. I was very like creative driven. So I would spend like money on buying like canvases and paintings, or like art supplies to make paintings, which I ended up selling. I used to go to this like nightclub thing where they did poetry. I was very young, and they would auction off my paintings. And that was the first time I was like, oh man, I can leverage my art and make money. But I was like sort of just reinvesting in that, and I was just learning. But I always kind of slap myself. I'm like, man, I could have taken $100 a week and just dropped it into a
Yes.
retirement thing or an IRA or whatever, and I would be so much further ahead now. But like again, it's kind of like, don't beat yourself up for that. You're here now. You can make decisions today that are going to really drastically impact your future. And now I'm sort of the knowledge base that I wish I had when I was young. But guess what? I have a son, and I get to pass down that knowledge base and inform him and like educate him and hopefully build smarter habits around him, so that he understands it way more than I did, especially at an earlier age, and I can set him up with the right tools and the right mindset. And I think that for me is honestly, it's just as powerful as if I were to learn it when I was younger, because it's like now it's this understanding of like, okay, now it's the sort of passing down of the knowledge. Of course, even if I pass down money or of wealth of any kind, they know what to do with it or know how to utilize it, at least to some degree, right? Or leverage it. And I think that's just as powerful as if you knew that knowledge when you were younger. So looking ahead, what trends or shifts in the economy? I mean, there's of course AI and all this madness. There's robots maybe coming, and everything is on battery operated. There's so many
Humanoid.
everything, potentially aliens. Like we don't know.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There's so many things, and then of course there's always this like economic state that we're in, right, where it's volatile, right? Things are up and down and political and all of
Yeah.
these things. What do you say to the person who struggles with putting all of that and holding it, and then saying, well, I don't know about retirement, I don't know about investing, I don't know what that looks like because I'm afraid of what's going on around me, right? I'm sure you get some of those people who have that kind of anxiety, to some degree, perhaps. When somebody comes to you with those kinds of things, what do you typically navigate them through?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we can talk about, they say history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I think throughout the 20th century, getting into 21st century, there is constant. It's constant. It's just more. I think unfortunately, it's more because of the way things are in the media. It can be more sensationalized now for ratings and just to get
Sure.
viewers. And I think unfortunately, what's transitioned is a tremendous amount of anxiety for the future for
Yeah.
most individuals. And what I try to say, which is easier said than done, is really to try to take a step back, look at the past, because if you look at the past, you really can really learn. And we always say there's a chart that I always look at that's called "Stay the Course," and really it goes through all from the Cuban Missile Crisis, Pearl Harbor. You can keep going further back. And there's always been issue, the stock market crash in the 20s, of the 1929. You can go back throughout history and say there's no shortage of reasons why you don't want to put it in the market because of all of this. But then if you look at the history, you understand the benefit of compounding and just looking at the long term. Humans are very emotion based, and they're very quick to make decisions. And oftentimes, when you make a decision to sell something, if it's market oriented, is usually probably the worst time. And so, part of my job is really to try to be, I would say, an accountability partner, or really try to be a coach for the person and try to help them say, well, this is the reason why you shouldn't do something if it's not in your best interest. And I think that is one of the things that I see, really, to try to have someone, whether it's a family member, friend, or an advisor, that can really help, because everybody needs talked off the ledge occasionally, especially when it comes to investing in terms of the ups and downs.
Yeah. When I was setting up all of our financial stuff, my wife and I, and getting to work with our guy here locally in Tucson, I was really like, I felt like just having those conversations and just like getting to know this guy, I really felt like a burden was like coming off my shoulders, right? I felt like there's a pathway, there's things we're going to work on. There's things that, like you said, like there's things I was worried about that I shouldn't have been worried about, because there's a lot happening in my imagination that doesn't need to be, you know what I mean? And what he was saying things, and I'm sure you can probably tap into this a little bit too, is that he's like, you guys are, and I don't know if this is something you guys say as financial advisors just to like make us feel good, but correct me if we're wrong here, but he's like, you would be shocked as to how many people don't take just the minimal stuff, like even just have life insurance. I think that's like probably something you can relate to, like one of the smallest things your father could have inputted, obviously based on his knowledge, and we're not blaming Papa Bear here or even my dad or whatever, right? But we're just saying, like, again, lack of knowledge, right? But just like the amount of lack of taking those small actions, and it's a small percentage of your income that could support you and your family in such a huge way. I was like, man, is it really that bad? And he's like, it's pretty bad out there.
It's difficult, and it's the system. It's almost like a self-fulfilling system, because we're not teaching it. It's consumer finance, which more than ever you need it. And I look at the statistics. Even there's a study done that I think 52% of Americans have less than $1,000 saved. And
I used to be one, by the way. I used to be. Thank God I'm not there anymore. But yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, and some of it's just taking small steps and having someone work through, whether it's just starting to save, where you just you set up a high yield savings, and every month you get paid, or every couple of weeks you just push over a certain amount, and it's out of sight, out of mind, so that you can't spend it. Just doing these little actions, if you do enough of them, it can go a long way in terms of just getting you in a position where you're going to be much better positioned for the future.
Yeah. It's so powerful, man. I mean, I think we think a lot about our like careers and our relationships and business or whatever it is, right? Like whatever it is we're doing, the kind of car we want, like, all this stuff, like deep research. But the thing we tend to like skew away from is like financial literacy, financial knowledge. And, I got the bug once I started going into self-development and business development. The third thing was definitely financial development. And once I understood it, or at least to the degree that I can take actions that I know will matter to me, it changed my life. I'm speaking from a personal perspective here, but I really want to bring context to what you're saying, man, because not only have I enjoyed working with you, but I really believe in your work, and that there's not enough financial literacy. That's why I tell you, I'm like, man, you got to make more videos. We got to get you to post more. We got to get you to do this more. Because
I need an extra day. I need one.
Yeah, I know, right? Because like you're a busy guy, but you do take that stuff to heart, and I love that you're doing it and that you're putting the content out there, even down to like the cybersecurity aspect of financial stuff. You're a very like dynamic, well-rounded individual in how you think about financials. So I love having you on, man. I think what you're doing with your work and your new book are not only reasonable, but they're essential. They should be on like every shelf. And I'm super excited for your new book. So tell us It's coming out. So by the time you guys listening to this right now, the book is out. It's amazing. Go get it. It's called Your Future Is Now. Um, it's it's one of those books that I feel like not only needs to be on every shelf, but really it's one of those books that you want to pass to literally every person, like younger generations, especially if you're just getting out of college or in college, like read this book, start applying some of these things. Find you that mentor, find you that person that can help get your financial stuff together. And there's no better way than reading a book. And here's the coolest part. This is my favorite part. There's literally not enough books about the financial world. There's hundreds, if not thousands of books out there. To some degree, they're good. They're not, whatever, but just there can't be enough because we're not teaching this stuff at school. We're not teaching this stuff at university. It's not a requirement. So it's really up to you as an individual to figure this stuff out. And here's my crazier part. No one came and saved me. No one around. I had no financial mentors that were like, Hussein, here's how you set up your retirement. Here's how you set, like, I had to go figure this stuff out. And I'm glad I did. And once I started, then I started going to look for them because they're not necessarily out there looking for you, right? So go out there and look for people like Jeff, connect with Jeff, reach out to him on LinkedIn, go to his website, which I'm very proud of. We just got it done not that long ago. It looks amazing.
It's amazing.
So go out there, get on his stuff. I'm telling you, Jeff is worth his weight in gold. His work is amazing. Also, it does help that he's one of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. And I wish I would have met him earlier to turn him into my mentor, but I have him now, which is fantastic. So on that note, Jeff, like what's one thing when people finish your book and they close it, what's one thing that you hope they walk away with or that they carry with them in making decisions in life about financials?
Yeah, so I would say the one thing would be, I think my hope for the book is to really be a reference where it's just not, you don't stick it aside or get rid of it. You just can sit it to the side. And if an issue comes up, whether it's, your auto insurance or coverage, or whether it's, you have you're not sure about how your credit score is calculated, or, how do you freeze your credit, all these different things that come up, you can use my book as a reference for that. And I think that's where that's where I hope the value is. Not just being a one-time read, but being something that can be really used as a reference book.
Yeah, so powerful. I'm going to be buying a few copies to give to my nephews and nieces. I'm very excited about that. I want them to be very financially literate, and anyone else that comes across my pay. I mentor a few kids. I go to this boxing gym, and there's some young guys in there that are really cool, and I mentor a couple of them. So I'll be buying them a few copies as well. There's nothing better than giving knowledge, and especially financial literacy knowledge. So thank you for the hard work that you put into this book and this work. Again, these are things you don't have to do as a financial person. Like you're fine, you're set, you know your stuff, but you choose to do it. And I think that is commendable. So thank you for passing your knowledge forward. And I hope it reaps you all the benefits, my friend, and helps support so many other people. On that note, friends, if you're out there, go follow Jeff on LinkedIn right now. Go get his book, jeffreypanik.com. Your Future Is Now. He has two of them. They're fantastic reads, easy reads. Other than that, thank you for being on the show today, my friend. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Hussein. I really appreciate it and enjoyed working with you, and just can't say enough good things about you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that, Jeff.